Hi, everyone. I hope that wherever you are safe and well. My name is Nakhle. I'm a consultant and a psychological safety lead at Cosmic Centaurs. And today you are joining us for a session in our seventh annual Cosmic Conference, a 3-week virtual conference taking place between March 25 and April 17. I am joined today by Dr. Connie Noonan Hadley, which I will introduce in a minute. While the Cosmic Conference is typically held in October, the pace and the gravity of events across the region made it clear to us that this conversation could not wait. So, to support leaders when they need it the most, we chose to bring this year's edition forward and convene this conversation now. Our conference is titled Grounded and Limitless, Leading Organizations that Survive and Thrive. And through this conference, we are hoping to support leaders as they manage prolonged uncertainty. At its core, this idea of being grounded and limitless is about staying clear eyed about reality while continuing to build what's possible. To explore this, we're bringing together more than 15 leaders, experts, academics, and practitioners to collectively make sense of what leadership requires in moments like these across 3 themes in 3 weeks. Week 1, Endure, how to survive periods of uncertainty. Week 2, Adapt, how do we evolve in response to change? And week 3, Thrive, how do we turn the lessons learned in a crisis into a competitive advantage, emerging stronger, more innovative, and better prepared for the future? You are tuning in now for week 1, Endure, which is about helping leaders face reality, preserve stability, and protect what matters most in moments of stress. This week, we have 8 webinars and 1 workshop. I'm sure the team will drop the links to the program in the chat below. Our speaker and I would love for you to actively participate in this session. Please share your reflections, questions, or experiences in the chat. We will be happy to take your questions and answer them during the webinar. Also, if you know someone who might find value in today's conversation, feel free to tag them in the chat box. Also, if you want to give back to the team, our team will drop a link in the chat to our leadership in the Arab World Survey. If you have 5 minutes to spare, it would mean the world to us if you can answer it. We're actually conducting research to capture how leaders in our region are navigating uncertainty so that others around the world can learn from us. Now to today's session, Present and Connected, Human Connection in Uncertain Times. We're here to focus on something deeply human at the center of all of this, human connection. Across the region, ongoing crises continue to create a sense of instability. And at the same time, inside organizations, AI and new ways of working are reshaping how people interact and where they feel they stand. So we're facing uncertainty both around us and within our workplaces. And in moments like these, human connection is essential. Uncertainty can make people quieter, more hesitant, maybe less likely to speak up, which is exactly when connection and psychological safety matter most. To guide us through this discussion, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Connie Noonan Hadley, an organizational psychologist and research associate professor at Boston University Questrom School of Business, where she also co-leads the Human Resources Policy Institute. Connie's work sits at the intersection of psychology and organizational life, exploring how leadership behaviors, team design, and workplace systems shape connection, belonging, and psychological safety. Her research on loneliness at work has been widely recognized, including in Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan Management Review, and other leading publications. And she was recently named to the Thinkers 50 Radar class of 2024 as one to watch in shaping the future of management. Beyond academia, she founded the Institute for Life at Work to translate research into practical tools that help employees thrive, especially in hybrid and AI-enabled environments. In 2023, we had the privilege of collaborating with Connie on the Harvard Business Review Rituals research, examining how everyday practices can strengthen culture and human connection in organizations. Today, our conversation with Connie is to explore how uncertainty and disconnection are impacting people at work today, why human connection matters even more in the age of AI, and what leaders can do to create more connected and supporting work environments. Connie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's been a long-standing relationship that I've had with those of you at Cosmic Centaurs. It's really been a pleasure and opened my eyes in a lot of ways.
Yes, totally. It's not the first time that you're with us. We really enjoy working with you. Also are appreciative of the support and of you always coming to the call and always saying yes to be with us. And today's topic is really important. I know that it has been at the heart of your recent research, and we want to learn from you, and hope also the audience will join us and learn together. And actually, giving everything that's happening around us in the region, it's more important to talk today about the uncertainty that we're going through. Whether it's, as I said, from the crisis that we are going through in this region, but also the changes that AI is bringing to our workplaces and to our life. So, when uncertainty is high, as I said, people often become more withdrawn, less likely to engage or to speak up. So let me start us here. In moments like these, Connie, what does it really mean to be present and connected at work?
Yes, I just want to acknowledge, first of all, to all those who are in your region right now, how difficult these times must be, and and how much I hope and support the work to achieve peace as soon as possible, so that people can go back to the ordinary things we worry about, like AI. But I think these times are turbulent for people across the world, no matter what specific thing is happening in their region. And it reminds me of an article I wrote a couple of years ago with Amy Edmondson and Mark Mortensen, saying making it safe to speak up even in risky times. And we were writing that article about layoffs and the prospect of unemployment that people were facing a couple of years ago, really intensely, at least in the US. And I think it applies to these times as well. No matter what the risks are, when people feel that they have more, as you said, uncertainty, but also just more fear about what could happen to them, everything from having job displacement or job loss to loss of life and harm to their loved ones. This is really when we need psychological safety and when we need each other more than ever. It just makes it seem harder to achieve, because of course the natural response, as you said, is to retreat to safety, and safety tends to feel like being in a bunker and kind of like staying quiet and under the radar. And I hope that people can try to work together to go beyond that fear and that automatic response. And so in that article, we talked about the winning formula for psychological safety. And the first thing, and this is really a plea towards leaders, the first thing you have to establish is a rationale for why people should get out of their comfort zone. Why should they take a chance and speak up or challenge psychological safety? Just for everyone's sake, as I know you know very well, Marie, means the comfort and lack of concern about retribution for speaking up about something. It could be admitting a mistake, it could be offering a new idea or challenging a decision, or in the case of relationships, just making an overture, like actually reaching out to say, hey, I'd like to get to know you better, and can I go to coffee with you? So people face these kinds of risks all the time at work. And as a leader, the job is to make it compelling to them to still step forward, to still take these chances on. And the rationale needs to be somewhat aligned with what's good for the organization, good for the team, and also good for the person. So really thinking through, why do you want people to be speaking up and reaching out right now? Like, what is the business case for that? I mean, in my research, we see tons of connections to productivity, innovation, and so forth. But, you need to make that case into the language and the strategy that you're employing. So that's the first part of the winning formula, is the rationale. The second part is really the invitation. So you can talk about the importance of this all day long, but unless you give people an opportunity and a way to contribute, then they're still going to have trouble doing so. So that might look like having specific feedback channels or specific one-on-ones where you ask questions like, what don't I know, but I should know right now? Or you might, so I'll talk a little bit later about social connection, create social opportunities where people have an invitation to reveal a little bit more about themselves. So you need the rationale, you need the invitation, and then you need consequences, reinforcement. And we know from long studies of human psychology, there's a phrase we use called bad is stronger than good. So that means, and people have heard, like, the number of compliments you need to offset any criticisms. We're just really primed to hear only negative feedback or to assume the worst is going to happen. So you have to really double down and triple down on giving positive reinforcement for when people make those moves and speak up. And so starting with a sincere acknowledgement and thank you is really important. So even if you don't like what the person said, you can certainly thank them for the courage it took to say it. And then hopefully putting other reinforcements in place as well, making it a joyful experience to tear apart, to red team your strategy together, to say, like, this is what we're trying to do here. Let's make it a positive experience. And then really, really under mitigating any negative consequences. So you want to stamp out anything from the dismissals and eye rolls to the making sure you're not just promoting people who only say what the leader wants to hear. And so, thinking about, like, what is the whole loop here, from the argument for why this is important to the ways it can be done, to rewarding and reinforcing the people who speak up and connect. So I would say that those principles, which we wrote a few years ago, have so much relevance today with what is going on in your region as well as around the world.
Thank you, Connie, for this. You actually described the situation so accurately, and I completely resonate with everything that you said. Like, on the rationale, I actually went back to this article yesterday as I was preparing for our time together, and I read that, and it really created a mindset shift to say that in times of uncertainty and people fearing for their job, they will tend to hide mistakes, and the leader's role in that is to actually flip their thinking and actually explain to them that what is putting your job in danger is the fact that we are not recognizing those mistakes, learning from them, and improving. Instead of you hiding them, you are invited to share. I love that, because you mentioned it again today, and it's really about how to maybe frame things differently, reassuring people that they are in a safe space, which is actually very hard when you're physically not safe. It's even harder to establish psychological safety, right?
I can imagine. And living in the US, I haven't experienced which you are experiencing right now. And so, I do want to acknowledge the difficulty of asking people, leaders and everyone, to do this, to take these risks when everything also already feels risky. The way to do it, though, is to see that bigger picture, to see the bigger goal here. Like you said, admitting mistakes when you feel like my job is in jeopardy, that is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But you shouldn't have to make that calculation once a mistake is made. Is it okay or not? If you have a leader who is saying preemptively, we're trying new things here, we're in a period of uncertainty, we cannot predict the future, we're going to make mistakes, like, just laying that groundwork then will make it much more possible. So it's so do this right now. If you haven't done it already, do it right now, because there will be mistakes tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And you can help make sure those come up quicker and can be resolved sooner.
Yeah, and as you put it, it's actually simple things, like you said, like just saying things, naming them. Actually, there's one thing that our CEO, Nakhle, did that I really appreciated. When we were back from Eid vacation, and the situation was really not not going well, we started the first stand-up by creating a positive space, and we asked each team member to say what they are grateful for in the person to their left on the screen. And we brought this reinforcement that you talked about and this positivity back into the workplace, and created this mindset shift that even though things are negative around us, we can still, through simple things, through intentional moments, we can maybe create a more positive space and help people through this difficult period. Which brings me actually, Connie, to the topic of loneliness, because this is what also we are fearing in this period, like people feeling more lonely, especially that in most cases today, companies here are reverting back to remote work. Yeah. So all of us living again through the COVID days, and feeling maybe isolated. How is loneliness affecting our relationship to work today?
Loneliness is such a big challenge around the world. I was doing research on this with Mark Mortensen, who I already mentioned I wrote that article with, but we were doing research on loneliness in 2019 before the COVID pandemic, where we were studying global teams like the one that you were on, where a lot of people are remote and they're working in different time zones. And we were really stunned. The statistic from that study was 76% of the people we studied said they had trouble connecting with their teammates. And we thought, well, this is really a terrible state of affairs. As we've gotten more interconnected through the benefits of technology and remote work, how is it possible that we've become more disconnected? But that seems to be what we've achieved. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and then added physical distance and all disruption of routines and in-office work. And that continued to accelerate this issue. But even now, in studies that I've done with Sarah Wright from the University of Canterbury in the last couple of years, we still see high rates of loneliness of workers, even those who are working full-time in the office. So I want to be clear that remote work, although it can be a factor in increasing loneliness, is not the main culprit here. But I think what is the culprit are a few things. One is the way we're doing work. So thinking about how work is structured and how it can not really give time for that beautiful moment of connection you just talked about when you came back from the Eid break, and you were saying that we wanted to just share a little bit of positivity as a team. I'm sure there was probably some pressure to just jump into that agenda, get right back to work and hit all those targets that you need to hit. But pausing and taking time to do that, I think, is the kind of thing that's been crowded out in a lot of workplaces, especially when people are on time pressure clocks or, working around the world in different, situations and timelines. It's hard to coordinate having those moments of connection. So I think that's a big part of why we're seeing that. And I also think that as people, at least I would say, particularly in the US, as things geopolitically have shifted, I think also there's a hesitation to get to know people because there's some concern that you may disagree on some fundamental aspects of what's going on in the world around you. And so I've had in studies people saying there are very few topics besides the weather I feel safe to talk about with my colleagues right now. I don't want to get to know them very well. I don't want them to get to know me very well because I need to make sure I can keep working with them, and I don't want to start thinking differently about them. So there are a lot of factors that I think have led us to this place. And this is the kind of thing we have to fight against. We have to fight against, similar to, it sort of goes in the umbrella of shrinking. We have to expand. We have to think about how can we fight against the inclination to stay in our comfort zone and only talk to the people that we really already know, and reach out instead to people we don't know, who may be from a different country or a different part of the world or have a different demographically than we are, because it is a fundamental human need to connect with others at work. And I think that if we can achieve this, as you've probably found in Cosmic Centaurs from working with your group for a long time, I know what a tight-knit group you have and how you support each other. I've seen people go on leave for medical reasons. I've seen, people having changes in their family circumstances that have affected the way they work. And it seems that the group is ready to rally around. And that's what I hope everyone can find, is a job where you can be at your best because others have your back, because that you can go to others for help when you need it, because you're willing to help other people too, which also makes us feel really good at work. We like to feel productive and helpful. And so this loneliness, just to wrap up this, it's a big global issue. There are many reasons why we're in this situation. In my most recent study with Sarah, we did a sample of people who use AI at work. So there are knowledge workers who are pretty advanced in terms of technology. And we find 52% of them are moderately or highly lonely at work. So it's a big problem. There are a lot of reasons for it. But I think that there's a lot we can do to try to address it, and we will benefit from a business standpoint as well as from a psychological and emotional standpoint.
I love your point about shrinking and expanding. It really gave me a visualization of how people might react. I love this. And we have Atish in the comment section who's bringing us also a research from Miller Knoll, who talks about relationship-based work being the shift that people are maybe going towards today, which really brings me to the AI question, because we've heard and read a lot of studies and recent news about AI replacing actually human connection and fueling loneliness, because people, instead of asking the questions to the colleague sitting next to them, they would go to the AI and ask them the question instead. And I know that the recent research coming to HBR soon is all about like how AI might be replacing human connection at work. Can you talk to us a bit more about what AI has to do with loneliness?
Sure. Yes, this is an article that Sarah Wright and I wrote that's coming out in the May-June issue of Harvard Business Review. What we did is, as I mentioned just a minute ago, we talked to people who are using AI at work, and they had to be pretty heavy users. On average, they were using it daily for work purposes. And we asked, how are you using this AI? And we gave them a battery of questions that were developed to assess social support at work provided by other humans. Because until recently, that was really your only option to get social support, right? Like there was no other thing you could ask. You can ask a plant or your desk, so you had to ask a human. So we looked at categories like emotional support, friendship and companionship. We looked at career advice. We looked at like growth, personal development and skill building. And it was remarkable. In our study, 74% of the people we talked to were already using AI for at least one of those types of social support at work. So they're much more than just getting task help and helping them analyze data and put together presentations. They're really using it as a human-like companion. And on balance, people were pretty happy about that. They really are feeling like this is a great thing. And I use it myself. I was just conversing with Claude this morning as I was getting ready in a very convivial way, just going back and forth, and it does feel good. So it's not so much that I want to say that we're finding AI is the enemy here, but when we also ask people, how is this affecting your relationships with other people at work? Some people are saying it's only enhancing them. Some people are using AI in a way that frees them up to have more interactions with other humans, but others are saying, you know what, I'm just not talking to other people as much at work. I don't need to. And we already know that teams are being disaggregated and reformed, and soon we'll have agents populating our organizational charts. So what we're worried about is that over time, we become more and more dependent on our AI for the things that we used to get from other people. And that can be very efficient and certainly cost effective, but it also has a cost attached to the humanity of work, let's say. And if I never go to you for anything anymore, I've lost a lot of opportunity to get to know you and to bond with you. I've lost that opportunity not only to get help from you, which makes me feel closer to you, but to give you help too, which also really bolsters my motivation and my feeling of affection and connection to you. So it's a lost opportunity issue that we're concerned about. And we also found that some people are saying that they've been using AI so much that they've also crossed over into the zone of they call it the uncanny valley, where these connections after a while leave a little bit of emptiness inside. And that's another form of loneliness, when you start to have this existential loneliness of feeling like, am I just alone in the world with my bot? Is there any other life form out there that I'm really connected to? So there are a lot of layers to what's happening right now with AI and how it's going to affect loneliness. I don't know all the ways this is going to translate into reality, but I will say that I urge every leader to get on top of this, to start paying attention to it. We asked people, are your leaders talking about the interpersonal impact of AI? And most people said no. So they're not hearing from their leaders like this. We understand the work impact. Let's also understand the people impact on this. Does it just make teams feel less connected? Does it make a newcomer feel more alone? Does it separate the generations or the departments further? So we need to really start paying attention to this and measuring how lonely people are feeling and what degree AI is exacerbating or mitigating that problem.
Thank you for this answer. There's so much I want to unpack in this answer, Connie. So you said first that maybe people are reverting to AI because they're feeling lonely. So the root cause is the loneliness, and this is maybe where is one area that the leader can focus on, like ask themselves, why do people feel lonely at work? And you mentioned that they can measure that. Can you talk to us a bit more about how they can actually know what's happening in their workplace?
Yes. So Sarah Wright and I produced a very straightforward 5-question scale called the work loneliness scale that we validated in multiple studies as measuring specifically loneliness at work. There are other measures that can get loneliness in general, but ours, we really wanted to target the workplace. And it includes questions like, I feel lonely while working, like very straight up, as well as questions like the degree to which people say they feel like they have others who would have their back if they needed support at work. And so we made that freely available. We've published it already in the Harvard Business Review 2024 article. There's a link on my Institute for Life at Work website people can grab. So you can take it yourself, but you can also use it to check in with your employees and find out what's going on with them. So we do encourage measurement, specific measurement. And it's not as helpful to use a general engagement survey for this kind of thing because loneliness is very subtle, it's very personal. And so we really encourage them to use something that's been developed with more scientific validity for this particular topic. So they can do that. And then I wanted to just back up to your point about how when people are lonely, they can turn to AI. You know, we find people who are not lonely turn to AI for these types of support just as much as those who are lonely. So this is really a universal trend that we're finding. I wouldn't say that your employees who are using AI for emotional support are the ones who are the neediest from a loneliness standpoint. I think it's just so darn easy and it's convenient. It's available all the time. AI, as we know, is really good at sycophancy. So it's like really good at making you feel like you have intelligent questions and important needs and great ideas. And so I think we're all getting caught up in using this marvelous tool in this personal way. But there are people who are already lonely. What it can do is exacerbate their tendency to withdraw from other humans. Mm-hmm. So one thing that people don't always know is that there's this vicious cycle with chronic loneliness, whereas once people become lonely for a while in any kind of social environment, so say your job, they tend to start to really I call them like mud-colored glasses instead of rose-colored glasses. Like they start to view people around them and the social environment in an excessively negative way. And there's been studies that have shown this. And so they will tend to withdraw from opportunities to get to know other coworkers or participate in social events like a lunch or a food dinner gathering. Because there's this built-in sort of defense mechanism that says they're going to reject me, so I'll reject them in advance. I won't accept their invitation because it's not sincere. They don't really want me. I won't have a good time or whatever it is. And so this is a cycle that I think with AI will just turbocharge it because now people can really turn to something else instead. They're not forced to break through that to talk to other people. Excuse me.
Yeah, feels a bit scary. And I think you touched upon this in your research. I read something about how you define social confidence, meaning that, so you said the leader can come and talk about the impact of AI on interpersonal relationship, on the work, etc., to make people more aware of the importance of preserving this connection. But what if the people that we are talking to or trying to bring in are resisting this from the point that they don't feel comfortable actually engaging or sharing? Like, is this also something that the leader can address or can have a role to play in?
Yes, absolutely. So you're referring to, we looked at people's loneliness, and then we also measured their level of social confidence. And it's based on a long-standing scale about shyness. Now, shyness, like introversion, is considered a personality trait. And there's a certain aspect of that that's kind of baked into people, genetic hardwiring. But about half of personality we know is shaped by the environment. And so what we're saying is that leaders have the opportunity to adjust the environmental factors. I'm not going to take someone who is extremely shy and make them a raging extrovert, right? I mean, and that's really not the place of a leader anyway, to start changing people's personalities. But that being said, social confidence in particular is something that can be built up as a skill. You can maybe not always love walking into a crowded party, but you can start to feel more comfortable one-on-one in conversations, talking with people, or answering that prompt. I'll go back again to your example of your stand-up where you went around the room, and people can feel more comfortable just saying something positive about the other person standing next to them. And we were really surprised that about a quarter of the people in our population said they had really low social confidence. So that meant they answered questions with agreement of something like, I feel awkward in social gatherings at work, or I feel uncomfortable talking to my colleagues. And that's, 1 in 4 people, that's really high, especially because these are professionals. And many of them in our study, by the way, we use the ages from 25 to 54, and the average peer person was in their 40s. They were, most of them were managers. So these are not, we're not talking about people, sometimes people might think, oh, these are the people who are just out of university and, they haven't figured out work yet. No, these are people who have longstanding careers. So I think that this, because of the prevalence of it and the importance of it, it behooves leaders to try to address it as best they can. So again, without trying to reach into your brain and change your internal composition, but shape instead the external environment that will cultivate skill building and lower resistance. What I would say that they can do is script and make more routine opportunities to engage with others. So, and this goes back to the research that I did with Cosmic Centaurs in Maryland, and I wrote that article for Harvard Business Review about team rituals. So team rituals, we really focused, team rituals, we talked about professional versus personal rituals. So professional rituals would be like the stand-up meetings to talk about the tasks of the day. And the personal rituals might be where people have a conversation and they talk about something from their childhood that really affected them, so really personal stuff. And we found that both of these types of rituals enhanced people's connection to each other. It increased psychological safety. It also increased the longevity and the satisfaction with the work of the team. And so, think about, like, for your shyer, more socially unconfident employees, what are some rituals that you can build in where it normalizes having these conversations? They don't have to make up a conversation starter. They don't have to wonder, well, what should I say back? You're kind of bringing people along in that dialogue, and then giving them repeated chances to do so. So the other thing we found, the reason we talked about rituals versus just, one-off gatherings, is rituals give comfort to people who are uncomfortable, because they start to be able to anticipate and predict what's going to happen. And that lowers the stress associated with participating. So those are ways that you can bring in your more low confident employees in terms of social engagement, is build out this infrastructure where things are a little bit more scripted so that people understand what their role is and how to respond, and then do them on a repeated basis so people can get more comfortable with them. And then, of course, you want to have some spontaneity as well. So you're going to want to integrate some things where you don't have any script at all. But the people who do the best with no scripts are the people who are already pretty good at conversing with other people and pretty extroverted. So just keep that in mind, that, you want to really operate to include the people who are going to have the most difficulty. And that would lean into more clear-cut invitations and opportunities.
Music to my ears. Actually, we know, like, with the research that we did together on rituals, like how much rituals really impact the culture, the environment, how much people are engaged and feel that they are part of a team, and that makes them feel more comfortable and share. So yes, cannot agree more. And we've seen it with a lot of the teams that we worked with. And I think, as you said, for the leader, also putting in the system and creating the environment is also a good way for them, because as a leader, they are also themselves going through uncertainty and pressure, thinking about how they're gonna drive the company and the team through this uncertainty, whether it's the crisis or the AI and everything. And I think it's also a good way for the leader to stay consistent and show up and be creating this environment for the team, because there's loneliness at the leader level as well, like through these
Yes,
times.
absolutely. And I can't emphasize enough that this is a shared endeavor. So I'm talking about the leaders because I think people will always look to the top for direction. And like I said, the rationale and the invitation coming from the top at first is going to lay that groundwork much easier for the rest of the organization. But this is not the leader orchestrating everything, because not only is that infeasible, like they've got other stuff to do and not the best use of their time. But the other reason is because I want to learn my own social skills as an employee, right? And if you do everything for me, then I'm just becoming more dependent on you. And so we want to make this a shared responsibility. And talking about, again, the team rituals, the teams themselves should take on shared leadership. Maybe they rotate who facilitates those stand-up meetings. Maybe, there's when I'm teaching, I create a community building committee among my students, and I take volunteers, and we have usually like 55 students, and I say, okay, I need 5 people who are going to plan events for the rest of this semester that are going to bring the people together. So, you want to deputize and engage people so that they also have that shared ownership. That's how it really works, because it can't be just a top-down forever initiative. You need the direction from the top, you need the investment and the endorsement from the top, and then you need the actual action to come from the bottom up.
Totally. Actually, at Cosmic, we do this thing where we rotate the ownership of the rituals. Like each time, it's a different team member who prepares, let's say, the next team time or like the next birthday celebration that we have.
Okay.
So I totally agree. And this is where, as you said, people starting building stronger human connection when they get to know each other better and they contribute together to that. There's a lot of I remember the Gallup research mainly, who talks about like the need of people for human connection, and that how it also creates more engagement. I think that the number was that if you have a best friend at work, you are 7 times more likely to be engaged. And rituals really reinforce this mutual knowledge and this like human connection. And I'm sure maybe Zaina can drop the link to the article of rituals. Like it has a lot of things that can be useful for teams. There's so much interaction in the chat on AI specifically. Atish said that actually using AI to handle repetitive tasks makes them free their time and have more time for conversations and connection. So it could be a good thing to build trust and strengthen relationships. Other people are saying that, as you said, like social media and those algorithms tend to show us what is aligned with what we want to hear, which is not always the right thing. Like Mahaline agrees that she doesn't like when AI actually agrees with her. Tala is asking, is there an argument for AI as a tool to help those with social anxiety and to promote networking at work?
Yes, and I'll take those comments and questions in turn. The first one about how AI could free up time, that is one of our biggest recommendations for how we could make this a win-win, which is that, but it takes a lot of commitment and structure to make that happen. So, we talk about in the article that's coming out, like, could you say 10% of the time savings is now devoted to team building activities? And we set that aside, because if it's up to each individual person, there's also research that says people just do more work. The more time AI saves, the more work they do, right? So you need to say in advance what will happen to that time savings. And I'm glad that person was able to deploy it towards, talking with other people, but it's not easy for everybody in every situation. The second one about getting AI to disagree with you and making sure you're not just getting your own new echo chamber that's just like we used to, or we still have on social media. I absolutely. And one of the other recommendations that we have is there's this idea that others have for AI in terms of making sure we don't atrophy our cognitive skills. That's another concern, by the way, that we're going to stop thinking well because we're using AI to do so much of it for us. And there's the idea of embedding friction into the interactions with AI, where AI doesn't give you the answer right away. It'll sort of give you some follow-up questions that you have to answer yourself, and that will help continue to build up your cognitive muscle. And in the same way, AI can be designed to continue to build up our social skill muscle by, for example, every time I go to it for something that a colleague could easily answer, maybe saying, hey, it looks like from the, because AI, if it's a company bound, for example, could say, Marie knows the answer to that. Do you want me to connect you with her on Teams right now so you can ask her that question? Or it'll prompt you to say, hey, you've been conversing with me a lot lately. How about taking a walk around the office and seeing if anybody else is up for a quick break? So we can design the AI also to facilitate skill building with social, in terms of social acuity and our ability to be confident in doing it. And that builds also another way that people can use AI, which is as their personal coach. So we've talked about how people are already using it for emotional support and career advice and that kind of thing. But some of the people in our study were also very deliberately using it to overcome their sense of shyness and inhibition with others. So one person talked about, I'm using AI. I want to get to know this coworker, but I didn't know where to start. So I used AI to help me practice. And AI was able to give me more information about this person and give me some prompts that I could use to get to know them. Other people talked about how they were going to have a difficult conversation with a teammate or with a manager, and they did role playing with the AI so they could feel more confident going into that conversation. So there's also possibilities of AI directly getting at that person's particular concerns in a way that I think could be really beneficial. But again, this all requires more foresight and planning so that it doesn't become just a crutch and just something that takes away all the other good stuff that we normally would do with other humans.
There's so much guidelines that you shared just right now about how to integrate AI in a healthy way in an organization. And I really believe, like, even with us as a team and with other people, you see that each one of us is experimenting with AI on their own, trying to do their work, or maybe automate their task, or write that email, or do this report. But we are not seeing enough conversation around how to make sure that it is integrated in a healthy way into the way of working. How can we make sure that it doesn't have a negative effect? So all of this also, like, we are like, everyone is navigating these new ways of doing things. Where do we get this guidance from? Like, I feel that you touched upon so many things that maybe not everyone had thought of. So how do we educate ourselves?
Well, it's interesting. So when we were writing this article for Harvard Business Review, the editor said to us, we need examples of companies doing all these things. We have these 5 recommendations, and I just gave you 3 of them. And so we were like, well, we had a hard time finding examples of those. We did find some, though. We were able to dig deep and find some companies. But I think we're really at the beginning of awareness of the impact of AI on people's social experiences at work. And so I would love, and if people want to post afterwards, examples of what they're doing in their companies or other companies they've heard of, I would love to hear that, because there isn't a strong collection of case studies available yet. But I mean, I think these things are going to, these could be really beneficial. And so I hope that this podcast and other, ways that we're trying to get the word out will help propel more companies to think deeply about that. At BU, as you mentioned, I'm an associate director of we just renamed it the Institute for Leadership and Work. And it's a group of companies and their top HR professionals. They're usually the chief human resources officer or the chief people officer. And so we're getting together in a few weeks, and we're going to be talking about these kinds of issues, because I think HR does have a role to play in creating policies and training programs and awareness campaigns, so that the effects of AI are, again, more proactively managed to be beneficial to people socially. I also think so much of this comes down to the design of the tools too. So I hope that there's going to be some people in tech who are going to think about this. How do we tweak our tools? Think about, for example, building in positive friction, how that can be done by just changing some of the parameters of how these things work. And so I think collectively, there's a lot of work to be done on addressing the impact of AI, but we're still early enough that I don't have all the answers and all the examples that I wish I had to support this.
Totally. And actually said you mentioned 3 of the tools. Do you want to give us the full list of the 5 ways
Oh my
we
gosh.
just can
Okay,
build
now
environment?
yeah, I gotta remember what the other. Oh, I know. One a big one is so especially with agents, you can do so much of the planning of social opportunities automatically now. So when we go to organizations, say you're like a really big organization, we say, okay, you know, people want to have a lunch and learn every month and they get to know each other's part social, part education. Then somebody's got it's like so somebody's job to book the conference room and like arrange the meal and send out the invitations and get it. AI can do all that. So we're really recommending, again, you could take all these beneficial qualities of AI to build out the social infrastructure that you need that relieves the burden on humans to do it, makes it more automatic. Also, by the way, AI is probably going to be better at doing a lot of that because it's going to give you more follow-up. You could take a transcript of the lessons and disseminate them to people who couldn't attend. I mean, there's so many great things that you can do to facilitate people-to-people connection through AI. So that's another one. And I'm blanking on the 5th one, but if it comes to me, I will let you know. But otherwise, people can read it when it comes out in just a few weeks.
Yeah, we're giving them a sneak peek into the article. When is it coming out?
So I think it comes out online April 7th, and then on newsstands April 14th.
Amazing. We'll be sharing that with our audience. Connie, I want to ask you a question. In your research, did you look into human or skills or capabilities that we think AI is not able to replace?
We didn't get into that. And I've been watching the evolution of AI from a psychological lens. And, you know, for a while, there was this idea of, well, humans are the only ones who can provide empathy. You know, like that's an example of a skill that many people would say, oh, my AI is extremely empathetic, makes me feel much better. Yeah. We have examples in our own studies of people saying, like, I vented to AI and it made me feel so much better that I wasn't angry with my colleague anymore. I mean, that's pretty powerful, right? That seemed like it would have been exclusively a human capability to relate to someone's pain, help them sort through it and come out feeling better. But so I don't know what skills or qualities are going to be exclusively human going forward. I do think, though, that going back to this idea of existential loneliness, that what humans can provide that AI truly cannot is that sense of really being seen, understood, and valued, because it's what we give to each other that can't be replaced, much less than what we can do.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that on top of what we're going through now in uncertainty, AI is also creating so much maybe worries or uncertainty for people around their jobs. So what would be an advice that you would give now for someone who is fearing that AI might replace their job?
Well, I mean, I think it's a real worry. I mean, if when you look at the list of jobs that are going to be displaced or replaced by AI, like people in research are really close to the top. So I get this. I feel this myself. You know, I just think as with all of this, suppressing and denying what you feel is not going to lead to good outcomes. So I think you need to think about how you can address it, you know, head on with acknowledging the stress and the uncertainty of that. One thing I'll just say that we talked about in the article I started off this conversation about with Amy Edmondson and Mark Mortensen, psychological safety does not equal job security. And so I think people also need to recognize that you can be in a very psychologically safe environment where you're free to speak up, including worries about your job. And the answer you may get back is, we don't know if you will have a job in a year. That, you know, there's no guarantees associated with being able to be open. But I think being able to have that conversation, what I would love to happen is that employee says, I'm worried my job won't be here in a year. The employer says, you're right, it may not be, but let's work together to figure that out. And so by talking about it, being proactive, but also constructive about it, and not just expecting everybody to take care of you. You know, we need some personal initiative in this too. I think you can find solutions. Maybe the solution's leaving the company on your own terms and going off to a new job that's more stable. Maybe it's a lot of companies are seeing great gains from reskilling their workforce and transforming jobs into areas that people can still do, even with the incursion of AI. So I think that that's what I would say is like, just take it head on versus trying to deny or suppress it or stick your head in the sand, as we say, and say, I'm going to try to do whatever I can to stay ahead of what the curve is for my industry with AI. But I'm also going to be talking to other people about it, because solving this individually by yourself, just like any other problem, is the least efficient way to do it. It's better to be doing this in with the conversations of others. And that's where the human connection will help. So, I just did a study with a company where people were working with patients as a support service group. This isn't a pharmaceutical company. And, there's a lot that AI can do, and they were worried about losing their job because AI can then send automatic refill reminders, for example. But there's so much about patients who are struggling with this company has drugs for really serious illnesses, that, all they wanted to do was free up more time to be talking with patients and helping solve those patients' problems. And so they were part of the solution that said, let's move all this non-essential stuff to AI, and then give us more opportunity to work with the hardest cases that we have. And does that mean that they'll need the same number of people in the future? Maybe not. Maybe they will have to winnow down their workforce a bit. But I think, again, like, they're finding ways to be part of that process versus just waiting to find out if the job is going to be there or not. So psychological safety doesn't work unless you have personal accountability as well. It's really important to be paired in that way. And so I encourage people to just seek out both as they navigate the stress of wondering how AI is going to change their career going forward.
Beautiful. Actually, while you were talking, I went back to what you said before about shrinking versus expanding, and I think what you said is really empowering, because facing reality, taking initiative, moving from being the object to the subject is really an empowering thought for people. As you said, like, get moving, like, things are happening, things around you are happening. So this is a beautiful invitation for people to actually take action and take initiative, even though times are hard, but life is still going on and we cannot stand still and watch things happening to us. So I really love that we're almost ending on this like positive note, and maybe a message of hope for people to say that actually the most rewarding part of this period is actually feeling that we are still finding this in us to look for new opportunities despite everything that's happened. And that's what will make us actually stronger at the end.
Yes, absolutely. And, it's an exciting time. And so when we do psychological studies, if you do something to stimulate someone's heart rate, you can actually coach them to either believe it's because they're afraid of something or because they're happy and excited about something. So I would say, let's think about this acceleration of our collective heartbeats right now as an opportunity for excitement versus fear.
Beautiful. I love this closing thought. But before we close, first, thank you. It was a really, really amazing conversation. There's so much takeaways from it. I want to take you through our lightning round. So like rapid fire questions that we are asking our guests at the end of each webinar of our conference. So if you're ready, I have around maybe 7 questions to ask you.
Okay.
First one being, what are 3 things leaders can do now to address loneliness and psych safety in their teams?
3 things. I'm going to give you 5, but I'll be quick. So I wrote this framework called the UNITE framework, and each letter has a meaning. And U is for understand. So that means really getting educated about psychological safety or the importance of social connection at work. N means normalize, which means having conversations. And so again, for both of these topics, leaders being open about their own feelings of loneliness or experiences in the past of loneliness, as well as their experiences of low psychological safety and speaking up, can be really helpful to open up conversations and make it normal to have those experiences. I is invest. So that means take time to put together like activities which require time and possibly a little bit of money to create those invitations for people to speak up and the chances for people to bond. T is trial, for trial and error, which means you got to experiment with this stuff. You can't just set it and forget it. So same thing with rituals. In our article, we talk about how you have to evaluate them regularly to make sure they're working. And then the E is for evaluate, which is to say, you know, have some metrics, baseline metrics before you change something. You can use the work loneliness scale or other types of measures. Like Amy Edmondson has a great psychological safety scale you can use. And then keep measuring that as you go. So sorry, I know I broke the lightning round rule, but that's my answer.
Very useful. We'll post also that in our takeaways, the Unite framework. Second question, what keeps you grounded?
Oh gosh, my kids. I have 4 sons, ages 18 to 25. And whenever I teach, I tell my students the first day that I love teaching because students, unlike my children, think I have something interesting to say and am occasionally funny, whereas my children tend to humble me daily, let's just say, on all dimensions. And so they definitely keep me grounded.
I have 2 boys. I don't know how you do it.
They're so much fun, but oh boy, tough crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Another question for you. What helps you be limitless?
I've been really into meditation lately, and I am finding a lot of benefit to quiet my mind and help, going back to the shrinking versus expanding idea. It's really helping me expand my field of vision and my confidence of what I can do.
Nice. One mindset shift for leaders?
I think the big mindset shift would be to not think about this as a nice to have, like a secondary priority, whether it's building connection or creating psychological safety. I really hope that they can shift this to being even before the strategic objectives and the business goals, because if you don't have these, you just won't achieve as well anything that you're trying to do. So it's we know from one of my mentors at Harvard was Richard Hackman, who is one of the leading, he's passed away, but was one of the leading scholars of group research. And you talked about how powerful the group launches. That first meeting of the team makes such a difference for its ultimate success. And so if you prioritize building psychological safety and people getting to know each other in that very first meeting, your team's success will soar from there. So putting this as the mindset is the first priority, not the second or third or fourth.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Actually, the 3 additional questions that we have for you, you get more than other speakers, are around AI because it's big on our agenda and also with the article coming up. So 3 fast questions about AI. What's the biggest mistake companies make with AI?
Oh, I think they're just focused on productivity and they're not looking to these other experiential aspects of it.
Beautiful. And one thing leaders should do tomorrow?
I think the first thing is I really do think on the AI front, I think the first thing to do is to start asking people to collect data on how it's affecting the way people interact with each other.
Beautiful. And last question, what role should AI play in human connection?
Gosh, I hope it is just like therapy can be very helpful for relationships development and overcoming issues. I hope AI becomes that kind of enablement device versus a divisive tool in people's lives. I hope it really can help bolster and support people versus pull them apart.
Beautiful, beautiful thought, Connie. We are so much looking forward to read the article. And I really like to thank you again for so generously sharing your insights, experiences, reflections. We learned a lot. I learned a lot today. I hope that the audience too. I see from the interaction, there are a few questions. Maybe we'll get to them later in the chat. So thank you again, Connie. Thank you for everyone who tuned in, for your attention, your questions. We really appreciate you being part of it. We'll be sharing actually the recording of the session on our LinkedIn page for people who want to catch it later, on YouTube, on our website. We'll put all the links for you to share also with people in your network that you think are going to benefit from this conversation. We also would be grateful, as a reminder, if you can answer the survey in our chat about leadership in the Arab world. And just take a few minutes of your time, we'll be very grateful. We actually continuing this conversation. It's only the first week of the conference. We have a big agenda lining up. Tomorrow we have a leaders circle with Danielle Delati, which talk about purposeful and grounded, meaning finding your purpose as a leader when everything around you is shifting. It's a 90-minute session that is designed to help leaders reconnect with their personal purpose, that will help them also navigate this uncertainty. I really encourage everyone who would want to register to follow the comment in the chat. And later also we have many other webinars lining up. Our next session, Indigenous Wisdom for Uncertain Times, is taking place tomorrow at 4 p.m. UAE time with Rama Shakaki, the president of Qatar Science and Technology Park. If you'd like to stay connected, you can follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, our podcast, our newsletter. You can find us there, and also stay tuned to what's coming next in our conference. Connie, thank you again. It was such a pleasure, and hope to see you in our next conference maybe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the good work you're doing to bring positivity during this difficult time.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, closing us off. Thank you.